January 14th, 2018, Perris, California, Sunday morning. At 5:50 a.m., a call comes in to the Riverside County 911 service. On the line is a female voice. The caller reports that she has just escaped from her home and needs help. The dispatcher initiates standard protocol. The first question is for a name and details. The girl introduces herself as Jordan Turpin. She states her age. The operator logs the data, but immediately notices a discrepancy. The voice on the phone sounds nothing like the age she stated. The timbre is too high. Her speech is unclear, with intonations characteristic of very young children. Based on her voice, she could be given a much younger age. The dispatcher makes a note in the system and continues the interrogation. The next standard question is the address. A precise location is needed to dispatch a patrol. Jordan is silent for a few seconds. Then she says she doesn't know the address, doesn't know it at all. The dispatcher re-asks, maybe a street name, house number, the nearest intersection, anything that could help determine the location? Nothing. The girl explains she almost never left the house. She doesn't know street names.
Doesn't know what the neighborhood is called. She only sees private homes around, but can't say anything specific. The operator changes tactics. She asks Jordan to turn on the GPS on her phone. Jordan follows the instruction. The system begins to pinpoint coordinates. The process takes time. The signal is weak. The phone is old. The dispatcher continues the conversation to keep the caller on the line. She asks, "Why did you escape? What happened?" And then Jordan says something that completely changes the status of the call. She talks about her siblings, 12 of them, all still there, in the house, unable to leave. They are being held in their sleeping areas. Their parents keep them locked up. Some haven't been outside for many years, haven't seen the sun, haven't communicated with anyone outside the family. The dispatcher asks her to repeat the information, to clarify. Jordan repeats it slowly, clearly. Metal restraints, tied by their hands, to bed frames. Parents lock them in rooms, barely feed them, punish them for the slightest rule violations. The operator immediately elevates the call to maximum priority. She relays the information to the officer on duty. The GPS finally locks onto coordinates, an intersection on Muir Woods Road. The nearest patrol receives a Code 3 signal, immediate response required. Officers Jonathan Montez and Jaime Hazel depart from the base. Travel time, 4 minutes. 5:58 a.m., the crew arrives on scene. A quiet residential area. Single-story and two-story houses, well-maintained yards, empty streets. Sunday morning, everyone is still asleep. Jordan is standing on the street corner. The officers exit the car and immediately realize the situation is more serious than the dispatcher described. The girl looks extremely emaciated. Her skin is pale, almost gray. Her arms are thin as branches. Her cheekbones protrude too much. Her clothes hang on her like a sack. Jeans several sizes too large, an old t-shirt. Her weight, visually, is critically low. The officers estimate her age. She looks much younger than her years, but Jordan repeats her information again. Officer Montez asks her to elaborate, to explain what held them, about her brothers and sisters. Jordan pulls out her phone, a cheap, old smartphone, a broken screen. She opens the gallery and shows photos. The first picture, a young woman on a bed. Her hands are secured to a metal frame. The restraint is short, not allowing her to stand. A lock on her wrist. The room is dirty, with trash on the floor. The second picture, 2 teenagers in one room, both tied to different beds. Similar restraints, similar locks. Their faces are thin, their gazes are empty. The third picture, another room, 3 people, all restricted in movement. The officers look at the screen and realize this is not a prank, this is reality.
Jordan explains these are her older sisters and brothers. The eldest is quite old already. The youngest is just a tiny tot. 13 people in total, including her. She is the only one who managed to get out. Officer Hazel immediately requests additional backup via radio. She reports the confirmation of people being held against their will. A rapid response team is needed. Medical assistance may be required. Jordan points to a house at the end of the street, a light-colored building, 2 stories. All curtains are tightly drawn. A minivan is parked in the driveway. The facade is clean. The lawn is mowed. From the street, the house looks absolutely ordinary. Just like all the others in the neighborhood. The patrol starts moving towards the front door. The second crew is already en route. Officer Montez prepares documents for forced entry. If people are indeed being held inside, there's no time for a warrant. The officers realize in a few seconds they will enter a house where 12 people have spent years in captivity. No one knew about the existence of these people. Neither neighbors, nor schools, nor social services. What the police discover behind this door will form the basis for one of the most shocking criminal cases in California's modern history. While backup is en route, the officers inspect the area. The house at 160 Muir Woods Road looks impeccable. A 2-story light beige building, a neat lawn, trimmed bushes along the fence. A new Kia minivan is parked in the driveway. Next to it, another car, a Ford. Both are clean, well-maintained. The facade is freshly painted. The roof is in excellent condition. The front door is massive, wooden, with decorative elements. The windows are covered with thick curtains, but the frames are new, without cracks. The mailbox is neat. On the porch, a mat with "Welcome" written on it. A typical middle-class home. Nothing suspicious. Nothing that could attract attention. Officer Hazel contacts the dispatcher. She requests information about the owners. 2 minutes later, an answer comes. The house is registered to David Allen Turpin and Louise Anna Turpin. Spouses, both without criminal records. No complaints from neighbors. No police calls to this address in recent years. While waiting for backup, the officers check social media. They find Louise Turpin's Facebook account. The profile is open, accessible to everyone. And this is where the first contradiction begins. Louise's page looks like that of an ordinary mother of many children. Hundreds of photos, family trips, holidays, smiles. A photo from Disneyland. All 13 people stand in front of Sleeping Beauty Castle, dressed in identical t-shirts with the park's logo, smiling at the camera. They look happy. A photo from Las Vegas. David and Louise renew their wedding vows in a chapel. Next to them, all 13 of their children. Girls in identical purple dresses, boys in white shirts and black pants. Smiles again. Everything looks perfect again. Halloween photo. The whole family in costumes. Someone dressed as a superhero. Someone as a movie character. All together. All in the frame. Christmas photos. A mountain of presents under the Christmas tree. Everyone sitting in the living room unwrapping boxes. Louise captions the photo, "Blessed with my beautiful family." Captions under the photos are always positive. "Amazing day with my loves. God is good. So grateful for this life." The officers scroll further. Hundreds of pictures, years of posts. Always the same. A happy, large family. No signs of problems. No hints that something was wrong inside this house. A second patrol arrives. 2 more officers. One of them begins questioning the neighbors, asking what they know about the Turpin family. The answers are identical. Quiet people, reclusive, don't really interact with anyone. Religious,
Someone saw them all leaving the house together on Sundays, getting into the minivan and driving somewhere, presumably to church. One neighbor says he saw these people only a few times in recent years, mostly at night. Sometimes the entire family would leave the house late in the evening and walk somewhere. In single file, one after another. Silently.
Another neighbor recalls seeing several young people from this family working in the yard once, mowing the lawn, watering the bushes, but when she greeted them, they didn't respond. They simply lowered their heads and continued working. None of the neighbors knew exactly how many people lived in that house. Some thought 8, some 10. No one knew their names. No one had ever seen them at a local school or in stores. A strange family, but nothing more. California has many religious communities that live reclusively. Nothing unusual. Officer Montez compares the information. On one hand, an ideal house, an ideal facade, ideal photos on social media, a happy family, trips, holidays, smiles. On the other hand, Jordan's testimony, metal restraints, people tied to beds, hunger, isolation, years without going outside. On the third hand, Jordan's own physical condition, nearly an adult but looks very young, extreme emaciation, a voice like younger children, doesn't know her address. And the photos on the phone, those photos that didn't make it to Facebook. Shackles on wrists, dirty rooms, empty stairs. 2 images of one family, public and real, and between them, an abyss. The officers approach the front door. Time, 6:12 a.m. Inside the house, complete silence, curtains drawn, no movement, no sounds. Montez rings the doorbell, waits. Silence. Rings again. A minute passes, then another. Finally, footsteps are heard behind the door, slow, heavy. The lock clicks. The door opens. Standing on the doorstep is a man of respectable age, David Turpin. Tall, heavyset, glasses. Dressed in loungewear, a t-shirt and sweatpants. His facial expression is calm, even slightly surprised, like someone who didn't expect a police visit on a Sunday morning. The officer introduces himself, explains a call was received about possible detention of people in this house. An inspection needs to be conducted. David's face doesn't change. He doesn't panic, doesn't try to close the door. He just nods, says calmly, "Please, come in. Everything is fine here. This is probably a misunderstanding." He steps aside, makes an inviting gesture with his hand, behaves like a person with nothing to hide. And the officers enter the house, where for the past 20 years a story unfolded that would later be called one of the cruelest cases of family imprisonment in U.S. history. The first thing that hits them is the smell. Sharp, suffocating, a mixture of ammonia, human waste, and something else. The officers involuntarily recoil. One of them takes out a handkerchief and covers his face. David Turpin acts as if he notices nothing, stands in the hallway, hands in pockets, calm face. Officer Montez steps inside. The hallway's dark, curtains drawn, no lights on. Eyes adjust to the dimness. The walls are dirty. On the floor, stains of unknown origin. In the corner, a pile of clothes. Montez asks, "Where are the other family members?" David points upstairs, says, "In the bedrooms. They're sleeping now. Sunday morning, usual routine." The officers go up the stairs. The steps creak. The smell grows stronger with each step. Upstairs is a corridor, several doors, all closed. Montez opens the first door on the right. The room is small. One window, tightly covered by a curtain, almost no light. On the floor, trash, food wrappers, plastic bottles. 2 beds. On one of them, a young woman. She lies on her side, doesn't move. The officer approaches closer, turns on his flashlight. The woman appears very young, thin, very thin. Her skin is pale. Her hair is dirty, tangled, dressed in an old t-shirt and sweatpants. Montez calls out to her, No reaction. He touches her shoulder. The woman flinches, slowly opens her eyes, looks at the officer but doesn't focus her gaze, as if looking through him. The officer asks, "What's your name? How old are you?" The answer doesn't come immediately. Her voice is quiet, hoarse. "Jennifer." She states her age. She is already an adult. Montes freezes. An adult? This woman looks like a teenager. Maybe a little older, but certainly not her actual age. He notices something else. On Jennifer's wrist, a metal brace, thick, with a lock. The attachment goes to the bed frame. The length is less than a meter. Jennifer can sit up, she can lie down, but she cannot stand up, cannot reach the door. The officer calls for backup on the radio, reports medics are needed, urgently. Second door, another bedroom, similar situation, trash on the floor, darkness, 3 beds. On the beds, 3 young people, 2 boys, 1 girl, all thin, all dirty, all in old clothes. Officer Hazel approaches the nearest bed. A boy lies with his face buried in the pillow. On his arm, the same restraint device.
The same lock. Hazel asks, "What's your name?" The boy doesn't answer, doesn't turn, lies motionless. Hazel repeats the question louder. The boy slowly turns his head, looks at the officer. In his eyes, fear. Pure, deep fear. The officer tries to reassure him, says, "We are here to help. You are safe." The boy is silent, just looks, then turns back to the wall. Third door, fourth, fifth. In each room, a similar picture. People on beds, some alone, some in 2s, in 3s. In total, the officers count 12 people, plus Jordan, who is currently outside. 13 in total. 3 of them are restricted in movement. The others are formally free but don't try to stand up, don't try to leave. They simply lie on their beds and stare at the walls. The officers begin questioning. They write down names, ask for ages. The results are shocking. The oldest, almost 30, looks like a teenager. The next one, almost the same age, looks much younger. Another one, already over 20, looks very young. Next are those who have already grown up but look like young schoolchildren. And the youngest, a very young boy, the only one who looks his age. He sleeps in a separate room with Louise Turpin, not tied, but thin, very thin for his age. The officers photograph the restraints. They note the length, from 50 centimeters to a meter. The locks are simple, padlocks. The keys, it seems, are with the parents. One of the officers asks a girl whose movements are restricted, "How long have you been here? How long in this position?" The girl thinks for a long time, then answers, "I don't remember. Maybe a year, maybe more." Another officer asks, "Why?" The answer, "Punishment, for trying to take food without permission." Medics arrive, 4 ambulance crews. They begin their examination. They measure pulse, blood pressure, check reflexes. The findings are preliminary but clear. All 12 people are in a state of extreme emaciation, body mass deficit of 30 to 40%. Signs of prolonged starvation, dehydration, loss of muscle strength. Skin dry, flaky, nails brittle, hair falling out. Some have dental problems, cavities, missing several teeth, no dental care for years. All have cognitive impairments, slow speech, concentration problems, disorientation in space and time. One of the girls cannot name the current year. Another does not remember her age.
Medics prepare for hospital transport. All 12 need to be hospitalized, urgently. While the medics work, the officers go downstairs. David and Louise Turpin sit in the living room, both calm, both silent. Officer Montes approaches, says, "You are both arrested on suspicion of holding people against their will and cruel treatment." He reads them their rights. David doesn't resist, stands up, extends his hands for handcuffs. Louise does too. No emotions. No attempts to explain or justify themselves. The couple is led out of the house, placed in different patrol cars, taken to the station. And in the house remain 12 people who spent years within these walls, some their entire lives. They don't know what school is, don't know what it's like to go outside freely, don't know the taste of normal food. Their world ended with these walls, these restrictions, these dirty rooms. And now, with the doors open, with the police here, with their parents taken away, they don't know what to do next. While medics prepare the victims for transport, an investigative team arrives at the house.
Riverside County detectives are tasked to conduct a full search, document all evidence, build a complete picture of what happened. The work begins on the upper floor, room by room, photographs, measurements, protocols. In the first bedroom, detectives find 3 restraint devices, 2 attached to bed frames, 1 to the wall. Metal links about 8 millimeters thick, length from half a meter to a meter. The locks are simple, padlocks. They can be bought in any hardware store. Detectives check the fastenings, securely fixed, impossible to tear out without tools. On the beds, dirty linen, mattresses old, sunken, stains of unknown origin. The smell had permeated the fabric. Under one of the beds, a pile of food wrappers, candy bars, cookies, chips, all packages empty. The detective photographs the find, makes a note, perhaps the occupants were hiding food. In the corner of the room, a bucket, plastic, dirty, used as a toilet. Nearby, a roll of toilet paper. Second bedroom, similar picture, 2 more restraints, even more trash. On the wall, scratches. Someone tried to write or draw something with their fingernails. Third bedroom, 4th, 5th. In each, traces of prolonged human confinement in an enclosed space, dirt, unsanitary conditions, minimal personal belongings. Detectives go downstairs to the first floor, inspect the kitchen. The refrigerator is almost empty. A few bottles of water, a pack of cheese, a jar of jam. That's all. On the shelves, canned goods, pasta, rice. The supplies would last a week for a small family, but 15 people live here. In one of the cabinets, detectives find a box of locks. Dozens of locks, various sizes, some new in packaging, others old with traces of time. Nearby, keys, a bundle of 20 keys. In the living room, another strange find, a sheet of paper attached to the wall. On it, a schedule, handwritten, written clearly, neatly. Sleep schedule. The detective reads the entries aloud. Sleep from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Wakefulness from 4 p.m. to 8 a.m. Inversion of routine. They sleep during the day, are awake at night. Nearby, another sheet, house rules, a long list. The detective photographs the entire document. Rule number 1, do not leave your room without permission. Rule number 2, do not take food without permission. Rule number 3, do not make noise.
Rule number 4, do not open the curtains. Rule number 5, do not use the phone. 23 rules in total. Violation, punishment. The specifics are not stated, but the situation in the bedrooms makes everything clear. In one of the rooms on the first floor, detectives find a computer. They turn it on, check the browser history. David Turpin searched for information on how to avoid scrutiny from authorities when homeschooling, how to register documents so that inspections were not required, how to legally isolate a family from society. Another folder on the desktop, family photos. Inside, hundreds of pictures, the very photos that ended up on Facebook. Disneyland, Las Vegas, Christmas. But detectives also find other pictures, those that were not published. Photos of people whose freedom is restricted, photos of dirty rooms, photos of emaciated faces, an entire archive, years of documentation. David and Louise recorded everything, systematically, methodically. One detective opens a folder dated 5 years ago, looks at a picture. On it, a teenage girl tied to a bed. The caption under the photo, Punishment Day 14, the 14th day of punishment.
Another folder, 3 years ago, a picture of all 13 people in the living room, sitting on the floor, looking thin. The caption, Fasting Week. Detectives copy the entire hard drive. This is important evidence, proof of the systematic nature of the parents' actions. In the basement of the house, even more metal restraints are found, an entire box, plus ropes, duct tape, locks, everything neatly stacked, supplies in case they were needed. The search lasts 6 hours. By evening, the investigative team completes its work. A full report is compiled. All evidence is seized. The house is sealed. David and Louise Turpin are at the station. They are held in separate cells. Officers attempt to conduct an interrogation, but both refuse to speak without a lawyer. On January 15th, the next day, the Riverside County District Attorney's Office officially files charges. David Turpin is charged with 12 counts of torture, 7 counts of abuse of dependent adults, 6 counts of child endangerment, 12 counts of false imprisonment. Louise Turpin faces the same charges, plus 1 more, complicity in all her husband's actions.
In total, each parent faces over 300 years in prison. This is the maximum possible sentence for such a number of charges in California. Bail is set at $9 million for David and $9 million for Louise. The amount is a record. The judge explains the decision, a high risk of flight and the extreme gravity of the crimes. The couple remains in custody. Lawyers begin preparing their defense. But there is too much evidence. Photographs, restraint devices, testimonies of 12 victims, medical reports. And at Corona Regional Medical Center, doctors continue to examine those who spent years in captivity. And the more they learn, the more terrifying the full picture of what happened in the house on Muir Woods Road over the past 20 years becomes. Medical examinations continue for several days, and in parallel, detectives begin to dig deeper, to study David Turpin's biography, to understand who this man is, and most importantly, how an engineer with a prestigious job and high income came to this. David Allen Turpin was born in 1961 in Texas. He received an education in electrical engineering. After university, he got a job at Lockheed Martin, one of the largest defense contractors in the U.S. He worked as an engineer on military projects. He had access to classified materials. In 1985, he married Louise Anna Robinette. She was very young. He was 24. They met through church. Louise came from a religious family. David also considered himself a believer. 3 years later, the first child was born into the family. Then the second, the third. Additions appeared at intervals of a year to a year and a half. David continued to work. Louise stayed at home. In 1999, the family moved to Texas. By this time, the Turpins already had 8 people in the family. David got a job at Northrop Grumman, another major defense corporation. His position was systems engineer. Salary, about $140,000 a year. Good income, above the national average. In 2010, the family moved again, this time to California. They bought a house in Murrieta. David continued to work remotely for Northrop Grumman. His income remained stable. By this time, there were already 13 people in the family. The house became cramped. In 2014, the Turpins sold the property and bought a new house, the very one on Muir Woods Road in Perris. Price, $431,000, a 30-year mortgage. From the outside, everything looks like the story of a successful family. Stable job, good income, own home, large family. But detectives find financial documents, and the picture changes. In 2011, David and Louise Turpin filed for bankruptcy. The reason? Inability to pay debts. The amount of debt is shocking. $240,000 on credit cards, another $150,000 on the mortgage of the old house. In total, almost $400,000 in debt, with a salary of $140,000 per year. Detectives examine credit card statements. They try to understand where the money went. Large expenses on entertainment. Disneyland tickets regularly, 3 to 4 times a year. The cost of a trip for 15 people, about $5,000 each time. Hotels in Las Vegas, restaurants, souvenirs. Purchases of electronics, cameras, computers, phones. The latest iPhone model for David, an iPad for Louise. Clothing, but only for the 2 adults. Expensive brands, shoes, accessories, food, restaurants, delivery. Credit card statements show regular orders of pizza, Chinese food, burgers, but only for 2, portions small, and almost nothing for the other 13 people. Detectives compare the data. In the period from 2010 to 2017, the Turpin family spent over $30,000 on trips to Disneyland, on entertainment in Las Vegas, about $20,000, on restaurants and food delivery, approximately $40,000 over 7 years. At the same time, household grocery expenses are minimal, an average of $300 a month. For 15 people, this is about $10 a day, less than $1 per person. No spending on medical services, no bills from dentists, no purchases of medications, 0. No spending on clothes for the other family members, only for David and Louise. No spending on school supplies, on books, on toys. Detectives check tax returns. David listed all 13 people as dependents. He received tax deductions, saving thousands of dollars a year. But this money did not go towards the upkeep of dependents. It went towards the entertainment of the 2 adults. Detectives find another interesting fact. Louise did not work. Officially, a homemaker. But she also registered a private home school, Sandcastle Day School. She obtained a license from the state of California. According to documents, all 13 people were educated at this school. The director and sole teacher, Louise Turpin. No inspections from authorities, no academic performance reports, no requirements. Homeschooling in California is almost unregulated. Detectives request school documents. They find only the registration, no curricula, no records of classes, nothing. Formally, Louise educated 13 people. In reality, there was no education. The school existed only on paper. It was a way to avoid questions from authorities, a way to legally keep everyone at home. And this is where detectives realize this is not spontaneous abuse. This is a system, well thought out, long-term. David and Louise methodically created conditions for complete isolation. They registered documents in such a way that no one could check. They spent money on themselves. They economized on everyone else. One question remains: why? What compels parents to starve their own charges?
To hold them captive? To create the appearance of a happy family on social media while a real nightmare unfolds behind closed doors? Detectives will find the answer to this question when they start talking to the victims. And what they hear will be even more terrifying than all the evidence found. Corona Regional Medical Center Hospital, January 15th, 2018. 12 people from the Turpin home undergo a full medical examination. Doctors work around the clock. Each patient is examined by an entire team of specialists: therapists, neurologists, psychiatrists, nutritionists. The results come in gradually, and with each new analysis, the picture becomes increasingly frightening. They start with the eldest, Jennifer Turpin, an adult woman. At a height of 162 centimeters, she weighs 37 kilograms. Body mass index, 14. Critical underweight. For comparison, a normal BMI for an adult begins at 18.5. Doctors measure the thickness of the fat layer, practically absent. Muscle tissue has lost strength. Her arms are thin like a schoolchild's. Her legs are weak. Jennifer can barely stand for more than 10 minutes. Calf cramps begin.
Blood tests show a deep vitamin deficiency. Vitamin D, almost at 0. This indicates that the person has not seen the sun for years. Vitamin B12, critically low level. Iron, severe anemia. Calcium, bone problems in a young woman. Neurological examination reveals the consequences of prolonged mobility restriction. The reason? Long periods in one position due to restraints. When a person lies or sits motionless for months, tissues suffer. Jennifer has partially lost sensitivity in her fingertips. Her teeth are in catastrophic condition. Multiple problems. Periodontitis, missing 3 molars. The dentist estimates her last visit to a doctor? Never. Her teeth have never been treated in her life. A psychiatrist conducts cognitive tests. Asks her to name the current U.S. president. Jennifer doesn't know. Asks her to name the capital of California. Doesn't know. Asks her to solve a simple problem. Add 15 and 23. Jennifer thinks for several minutes. Makes a mistake. Her developmental level corresponds to elementary school grades, despite Jennifer being an adult woman. In reality, her intellect had not developed for the past 20 years.
The next patient is Joshua Turpin, 27 years old. Height 170 centimeters, weight 39 kilograms. A similar picture: emaciation, loss of strength, vitamin deficiency. But Joshua has additional problems. Doctors find old injuries: left arm, right leg. Recovery proceeded incorrectly, without medical help. Bones are deformed. Joshua limps. His arm moves with limited range. The doctor asks, when did this happen? Joshua doesn't remember exactly. Maybe 5 years ago, maybe 7. He fell off the bed during a punishment. His parents didn't call a doctor. They just left him in the room, said it would heal on its own. The third patient is Jessica Turpin, 25 years old, weight 35 kilograms, height 158 centimeters, the thinnest of all. Doctors record signs of prolonged dehydration in Jessica. Skin dry, flaky, lips cracked, kidneys working at their limit. A little more and irreversible processes would have begun. A psychiatrist conducts a test, asks Jessica to write her name. Jessica takes the pen uncertainly, writes in large, uneven letters like a first grader. The doctor asks her to write a simple sentence.
Jessica cannot, doesn't know how to form a sentence.
reading at the most basic level, counting up to 20 with errors. General knowledge, almost non-existent. Doctors examine the others. The picture repeats. All 12 people are in a state of extreme emaciation. All have muscle weakness. All have vitamin deficiencies. All have cognitive impairments. The younger family members show developmental delays, physical and mental. The youngest, relatively lucky. He started receiving more attention and food in the last year, but even he is 20% below normal weight. Doctors hold a consultation, discuss the results. The main question: could this have been caused by a hereditary disease? Perhaps the whole family has some rare pathology. Geneticists conduct analyses. They take DNA samples from all 12 people. They check for known syndromes that cause growth and developmental delays. Result? Negative. No anomalies. No congenital diseases that could explain such a condition. Endocrinologists check hormone levels, thyroid gland, pituitary gland, adrenal glands. All normal. More precisely, they would be normal if the person had eaten normally.
The expert's conclusion is unequivocal. The condition of all 12 people is caused by external factors: prolonged malnutrition, restriction of movement, lack of medical care, social isolation, lack of education. This is not a disease. This is the result of systematic actions. Actions that continued for years, perhaps decades. The hospital's chief physician compiles a final report, submits it to the prosecutor's office, a 40-page document, detailed description of each patient's condition, medical terms, figures, graphs. But the essence is simple. 12 people spent years in monstrous conditions. They were deprived of food, kept in unsanitary conditions, deprived of movement, deprived of education, deprived of medical care, deprived of contact with the outside world. And all of this was done by their own parents, people who were supposed to protect and care for them. Instead, they turned the house into a place of confinement, and their loved ones into prisoners. Prosecutors read the report, add medical conclusions to the case. Now testimonies are needed, detailed testimonies from the victims themselves. It's necessary to understand how it started, how it continued.
And most importantly, why no one knew what was happening behind the closed doors of the house on Muir Woods Road all these years. Detectives begin questioning relatives. It's necessary to understand how a family of 15 people could live in complete isolation for decades. Someone should have noticed. Someone should have asked questions. The first person called for questioning is Teresa Robinette, Louise Turpin's sister. She lives in Texas, hasn't seen Louise in person for over 20 years, but tried to maintain contact. The detective asks, "When was the last time you spoke with your sister?" Teresa answers, 2 years ago, on the phone. The conversation lasted about 5 minutes. Louise was cold, answered briefly, said everything was fine with them, then quickly said goodbye and hung up. The detective clarifies, and before that? Teresa recalls, about 5 years ago, also a short conversation. And even earlier, about 10 years ago. Only 3 conversations in 20 years. The detective asks, "Did you try to meet?" Teresa nods, many times. The first time, when Louise gave birth to her 3rd child. Teresa wanted to come, congratulate, help with the little ones.
Louise refused, said it wasn't convenient right now. David works a lot. The house isn't ready for guests. They'd call later. The second time, several years later, Teresa again offered to come. Louise again found a reason to refuse. Said they were planning a move. Everything was packed, messy, better to wait. third time, fourth, fifth. Each time Louise found a reason, either renovations or illness or financial difficulties, or simply now isn't the best time. Teresa asks, "What if I just come without warning, as a surprise?" Louise reacts harshly, says it's unacceptable, that David doesn't like uninvited guests, that it's their house, their rules. If Teresa shows up without permission, she won't be let in. Teresa tries to speak with her nieces and nephews, asks Louise to give her the phone number of one of the older children, wants at least to wish them a happy birthday. Louise refuses, says they don't have personal phones. All communication goes through her. The detective asks, "And photos? Did Louise send photos?" Teresa opens her phone, shows several pictures, the very same photos from Facebook. Disneyland, Las Vegas, everyone smiling, everyone looks happy. But Teresa notices something strange. In the photos, everyone is dressed identically. Girls in identical dresses, boys in identical shirts, like a uniform. Like uniforms. Another oddity, no one changes over time. Photos were taken over the years, but the people in them look almost the same. They don't change, don't grow, as if time has stopped. Detectives interview Louise's parents, the grandparents of the 13 people from the Turpin home. They tell a similar story. Years of attempts to establish contact, constant refusals. Louise didn't let her parents into the house, didn't allow communication with her grandchildren, changed phone numbers. The grandmother recalls once she did come, without warning. She arrived at the house in Texas where the Turpins were living at the time, knocked on the door. Louise opened it, stood in the doorway, didn't let her in, said the house was messy, that everyone was sleeping, that it wasn't a good time. The grandmother asked at least to see her grandchildren. Louise refused, said, "Next time," closed the door. There was no next time. Contact was completely severed. Detectives contact David's parents. A similar situation. No access to grandchildren, no visits, rare calls on holidays, short, formal conversations. David's father recalls once he came for his grandson's birthday, brought a gift. David met him at the door, took the gift, said thank you, but didn't invite him inside, said the boy was sleeping, that it was better not to disturb him. Detectives check the family's address history. Over 20 years, the Turpins moved 5 times. Texas, then another city in Texas, then California, the city of Murrieta, then Perris. Each move coincided with attempts by relatives to establish contact. As soon as a family member learned the address and tried to visit, the Turpins would move. Detectives compare the facts. This isn't just reclusiveness. This is systematic isolation, a well-thought-out strategy. Louise and David didn't just avoid relatives. They actively built barriers, changed numbers, moved, didn't provide contact information, didn't invite guests, didn't visit themselves. Even photos on social media were carefully selected, only those where everyone looked normal. No pictures of emaciated people. No hints of problems. Detectives check the church the family attended. They find the pastor, ask, "How often did you see the Turpin family?" The pastor answers, "Once every few months. They would come to the service, sit in the back row, leave immediately after it ended. Didn't interact with anyone." The detective clarifies, "No one asked questions, noticed anything strange." The pastor recalls, "Once a parishioner approached Louise, tried to introduce herself, asked how old the youngest was. Louise answered briefly, turned and left. They weren't seen in church again for several months." Detectives conclude, the isolation was absolute. David and Louise allowed no one into their lives, neither relatives, nor friends, nor neighbors, nor church parishioners. This was not a result of religious beliefs. It was not merely a reclusive lifestyle. It was a deliberate strategy, a strategy to conceal what was happening behind closed doors, because if someone had entered the house, they would have immediately seen the truth. They would have seen emaciated people. They would have seen restraint devices. They would have seen unsanitary conditions.
They would have seen the reality that David and Louise had so meticulously hidden for years. And now that this reality has been exposed, detectives need to understand the main thing: how exactly this situation unfolded, when the harsh treatment began, how it escalated, and what exactly compelled Jordan on that Sunday morning to take the phone and dial 911, despite years of fear and isolation. Detectives returned to the house on Muir Woods Road. A repeat search. This time, they dig deeper. In one of the bedrooms, the investigator opens a closet. Under a stack of old clothes, a cardboard box. Inside, notebooks. Dozens of checkered school notebooks. The detective opens the first one. The handwriting is childish, uneven. Date, 2009. Entry, "Today Mom said I could write. This is my diary." The investigator pages further. At first, the entries are ordinary. "We watched a movie. Brother told a funny joke." But then the tone changes. "Today Mom was angry. I took a cookie without permission. Now 3 days without food." The next entry, 5 days later. "I'm very hungry. Mom gave me a piece of bread. I want more." The detective calls the others. They start searching further.
They find more boxes with notebooks. In total, over 300 diaries are seized, some almost new, others old, yellowed. Investigators take everything to the station, begin systematic analysis, read, compile a chronology. The picture gradually emerges. Early 2000s, relative normality. Mid-2000s, start of isolation, homeschooling, restriction of contacts. Late 2000s, strict rules, food restriction, punishments. Early 2010s, escalation, restraints, systematic starvation. Mid-2010s, complete isolation. The diaries are handed over to the prosecutor's office. Experts confirm the entries were made by different people over many years. The prosecutor adds them to the case as key evidence. Now there are not only medical reports and victim testimonies, there is written documentation. Hundreds of pages, years of entries. And now it remains to understand the last thing. What exactly made the parents do this? What motivation lies behind actions that cannot be explained by any logic? Psychologists are brought into the investigation. The mechanism needs to be understood. How is such a thing even possible? People of different ages lived in the house. 7 of them were adults. Adults, by law. They could have left. They could have called. They could have asked for help. But they didn't do it for years. Dr. Allison Davis, a clinical psychologist with 20 years of experience, studies the case materials, reads the diaries, reviews medical reports, interviews the victims in the hospital. Then she compiles a report, explains to the investigation what happened here. This is called learned helplessness, a state where a person stops trying to change a situation, even when there's an opportunity, because for years they were taught attempts are futile. Davis explains the mechanism. David and Louise created a system of total control, multi-layered, well thought out. First level, information blockade. No access to the outside world. No television except what parents allowed. No internet except controlled sessions. No phones. No books except a few approved ones. The people in the house didn't know how the outside world worked, didn't know their rights, didn't know that what was being done to them was a crime. The older ones remembered school, remembered how it used to be, but that was so long ago.
Memories were blurred. Reality, it was the house. It was the restrictions. It was the hunger. This was all they had known for the past 10 to 15 years. Second level, fear of the outside world. David and Louise constantly instilled, it's dangerous outside. There are bad people out there, drugs, crime. Everyone wants to harm you. The house is the only safe place. The parents showed news about crimes, about disasters, about terrorist attacks, said, see, that's what happens out there. That's why we're protecting you. That's why you must stay here. They created an image of the outside world as a hostile environment, where any stranger is a threat, where the police won't help but make things worse, where social services will take everyone and separate them into different homes and they will never see each other again. Third level, collective responsibility. If one person broke a rule, everyone was punished. Someone took food without permission, the whole family was deprived of dinner. Someone tried to open a window, everyone was deprived of movement for a day. This created pressure within the group. People were afraid not only for themselves, but also for the others.
Afraid that their actions would harm their siblings. This paralyzed any attempts at resistance. Davis explains, in such conditions, a special mindset forms. A person begins to believe that parents are omnipotent, that they know everything, see everything, control everything. Even when the parents are sleeping, the fear remains. Fear that they will hear, that they will find out, that the punishment will be terrible. The psychologist gives an example from the diaries. One of the entries, I thought about running away. Stood at the door, hand on the doorknob, but then I imagined what would happen to the others, how the parents would punish them for my leaving, and I couldn't open the door. This is not cowardice. This is the result of a system of control built over years. Another factor, physical weakness. Chronic malnutrition led to the people in the house being physically incapable of active actions. Run? Where? They didn't have the strength to reach the end of the street. Muscle weakness, dizziness from lack of nutrition, constant fatigue. Davis studies Jordan's testimony, the one who finally decided to call 911. Asks, what changed? Why now? Jordan explains.
She saw her siblings' condition worsening, saw one of them barely moving, saw another stop speaking, just lying there and staring at the ceiling. She realized if something isn't done now, someone might not survive. Plus, an accident. The parents left an old phone behind, forgot to confiscate it. Jordan found it, charged it, spent 2 years planning her escape, studied how to dial 911, memorized what to say, waited for a moment when her parents would be especially sound asleep. That moment came on January 14th, 2018. Jordan slipped out of the house, dialed the number, and set in motion a chain of events that destroyed a system built over 20 years. Dr. Davis concludes in her report, the situation in the Turpin house is a classic case of prolonged psychological suppression. The victims were in a state of deep trauma. Their perception of reality was distorted by years of manipulation. Their ability to make independent decisions was suppressed by a system of punishments and fear. Recovery will take years, perhaps decades. Some consequences will remain forever. The report is submitted to the prosecutor's office. Now it's clear not only what happened, but also how it worked. It remains to hear the version of the accused themselves, to understand what they will say in their defense, and whether there is any explanation at all that could justify 2 decades of systematic actions against their own family. The investigation asks, how could 13 people not attend school for years
and no one noticed? Where were the teachers? Where were social services? Where was the oversight? Detectives request documents from the Riverside County Department of Education. They check records for all members of the Turpin family. They search for information on school attendance, on medical examinations, on any contacts with official structures. Result? 0. No records of attendance at public or private schools. No medical examinations. No contacts with social services. But detectives find another document. The registration of a private school. Sandcastle Day School. Address, 160 Muir Woods Road. The very same house. Registration date, 2010. Director and founder, David Allen Turpin. Sole teacher, Louise Anna Turpin. Number of students, 13. Detectives dig further, request all school documents, curricula, performance reports, class schedules.
The answer comes: no documents. The school is registered, but no reports are required. Investigators contact the California Department of Education, asked to explain how this works. A department representative explains, in California, homeschooling is minimally regulated. There are 3 legal ways to educate family members at home. The first, to register as a private school. The second, to hire a licensed tutor. The third, to enroll in an independent study program through a public school. The Turpins chose the first option. They registered a private school, filled out a form, paid a small fee, received registration. The detective asks, "And that's it? No checks?" The representative confirms, no checks. The law does not require inspections of private homeschools, does not require academic performance reports, does not require confirmation of teacher qualifications, does not require social services visits. The only requirement is to file an affidavit once a year, a document stating the number of students and confirming that instruction is being provided, a 1-page form without details. David Turpin duly filed these affidavits every year from 2010 to 2017.
8 years in a row. He indicated the number of students, 13. Signed. Mailed it in. No one ever checked whether actual instruction was taking place at this school. No one came to the address. No one conducted tests. No one communicated with the students. Detectives check the legislation of other states. Compare requirements. In New York, homeschooling requires quarterly reports, periodic tests, inspector visits. In Pennsylvania, annual knowledge assessment, curriculum review, medical examinations. In Massachusetts, mandatory curriculum approval, regular meetings with school district representatives. But in California, there are practically no requirements, the state with the most liberal approach to homeschooling in the country. Investigators find statistics. Over 3,000 private home schools are registered in California. Most are legitimate. Parents genuinely educate their children. But the system is built on trust. It is assumed that parents act in good faith. It is assumed that if a parent registers a school, it means they will actually teach. There are no verification mechanisms. Detectives check neighbors again.
Asked, did you ever see any signs of schooling, textbooks, school buses, something that would indicate a school in the house? The answers are identical. No. No signs. The house was always quiet. No activity. No people entering or exiting during the daytime. One neighbor recalls he once asked David what his family did during the day. David answered briefly, homeschooling. The neighbor nodded, didn't ask more questions. This is California, after all. Homeschooling is a normal practice. Detectives check if there were any signals to the system. Maybe someone called with a complaint. Maybe someone suspected something was amiss. They check the Child Protective Services database.
0 reports for 160 Muir Woods Road. No one ever complained about the Turpin family. No one reported suspicions. They check medical records. No visits to doctors in the last 10 years. No vaccinations. No mandatory checkups. The system failed. But the system wasn't designed to catch such cases. It was assumed that parents registering a homeschool did so for the benefit of their dependents. It was assumed they acted in good faith. David and Louise Turpin exploited this loophole.
They registered a school, not for education, but for cover, to create a legal basis for keeping 13 people at home without contact with the outside world. The Department of Education is not to blame. Social services are not to blame. They operated within existing laws that did not foresee the possibility of such abuse. All responsibility lies with 2 people, David and Louise Turpin, who methodically constructed a legal facade, registered a school, filed affidavits, showed happy photos on social media, created the illusion of a normal family, and behind this illusion, committed what now needs to be proven in a court. Detectives realized they need to dig deeper. The story didn't start in California. The Turpin family lived in Texas until 2010. The first 8 of the 13 children were born there. The family spent over 20 years there. Investigators send requests to Texas police. They check the addresses where the Turpins lived. They find several. The last one, the town of Rio Vista, a small town an hour's drive from Dallas. The family bought a house there in 2003, lived there until 2010. 7 years. Detectives go to the location, find old neighbors.
Begin questioning. Kathy Miller lived across the street from the Turpin house. She remembers this family, remembers them well. Kathy recounts, the house always looked strange. Windows closed, the yard overgrown. A car stood in the driveway for months without moving. It gave the impression that no one lived there. But people were there. Kathy saw them sometimes, late in the evening or very early in the morning. The whole family would come out in single file, one after another, silently. They would get into the car and drive away, return several hours later. The detective asks, "Did you interact with them?" Kathy shakes her head. Tried several times, came with a pie, knocked on the door. Louise opened it 5 centimeters, took the pie, said thank you, closed the door. No conversations, no invitation to come in. Another neighbor, James Richardson, recalls even stranger details. One night he was walking his dog, heard a noise coming from the Turpin house, approached closer, saw several young people in the yard. They were digging a hole in the dark, without flashlights. James called out to them, asked if everything was okay. They were scared, didn't answer. Quickly returned to the house. James thought maybe they were burying something valuable or saying goodbye to a pet. He didn't give it much thought. A third neighbor, Mary Ann Thompson, talks about food. Several times she saw someone from the Turpin family approach her trash can, open the lid, take out discarded food, bread, fruit, things that were still edible. Mary asked Louise, perhaps they needed help, perhaps she could bring some groceries. Louise sharply refused. She said they had everything, that it was a misunderstanding. But the episodes continued. Mary began to deliberately leave edible items on top of the bin. She didn't throw them deep inside. She understood someone needed them. In 2010, the Turpin family moved away, suddenly. They didn't say goodbye to their neighbors. They simply vanished. The house remained empty. The bank put it up for sale due to unpaid mortgage. The real estate agent who prepared the house for sale still remembers what he saw inside. He told detectives the house was in a terrifying state. Garbage everywhere, a layer of grime on the floor. In the bedrooms, signs of complete unsanitary conditions.
on the floor, in the corners, on the walls. The smell was so strong that the realtor called a disinfection service. Professionals. It took them a week to clean the house. In one room, they found pets that were no longer alive. Hamsters, rabbits, left without water or food. Simply forgotten. In another room, hundreds of food wrappers, hidden under the bed, behind the wardrobe, as if someone was hiding food and eating in secret. The realtor didn't understand then. He thought just a very neglected family, unable to cope with daily life. It happens. He didn't report it to the police, cleaned the house, sold it, forgot about it. Detectives interviewed more neighbors, collecting more details. One woman recalled she saw several young people from the Turpin family standing by the fence, watching the neighbors' children play. Silently. They didn't approach, they just watched. When she waved at them, they quickly went back inside the house. Another neighbor remembered one day he found a note on his porch, in children's handwriting. "Please help, I'm hungry." There was no signature. The neighbor didn't know who the note was from. He thought it was a prank, threw it away.
Detectives realized the pattern didn't start in California. It began much earlier, in Texas, perhaps even before Texas. The abuse wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a system that evolved over years, gradually, step by step. First isolation, then food restriction, then punishments, then restraints. Each year the situation worsened. With each move, it became more extreme. And all these years, no one intervened. Neighbors saw oddities but didn't attach importance to them. The realtors saw the signs but thought of mess, not a crime. The system didn't catch the signals. David and Louise exploited this. They moved before anyone started asking serious questions. They created an appearance of normalcy, but behind closed doors, they methodically turned the lives of 13 people into a nightmare that lasted decades. January 18th, 2018, Riverside County Police Department, interrogation room. David Turpin was brought in first, handcuffed, orange prison uniform, glasses, a calm face, emotionless. Detective John Solis turned on the camera, started recording, introduced himself, read out the rights. David nodded, said he understood.
Solis began with a simple question. "Tell me about your family." David answered monotonously. They had 13 people, a large family. They lived together. He worked as an engineer. Louise managed the home and homeschooling. The detective asked about the metal restraints. What were they for? David's expression didn't change. He said calmly, "It's a safety measure. Some of them have behavioral problems. They try to harm themselves. The restraints protect them." Solis clarified, "Protect them from what?" David explained, "From falls, from going outside unsupervised, from eating something wrong and getting poisoned. It was for their own good." The detective showed photos from the house, dirty rooms, restraints on beds, buckets instead of toilets. David looked at the pictures without emotion. He said, yes, it wasn't very clean there. They didn't always have time to clean up. A large family, a lot of work. Solis asked about food. Why did they receive food once a day? David replied, "That's not true. They ate normally. Perhaps not 3 times a day, but enough. They just have that metabolism, genetics. They are all naturally thin." The detective showed medical reports. Extreme emaciation, 40% underweight, signs of prolonged starvation. David shrugged. He said, "Doctors can be wrong. They don't understand their family. They have peculiarities." Solis changed tactics. He asked, "Do you love your dependents?" David nodded. "Of course. He protects them.
provides for them, gives them a roof over their heads, educates them, does everything he can. The detective asked, "Aren't you concerned about their current condition? They're in the hospital." David was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "They will be fine. The doctors will take care of it." Not a single question about how they felt. Not a single concern. Not a single emotion. The interrogation lasted 3 hours. David remained calm the entire time. He didn't raise his voice. He showed no remorse. He simply denied the facts or explained them in his own way. When asked why he didn't let them go outside, he replied, "It's dangerous out there. Drugs, crime." He was protecting them. When asked why he didn't take them to doctors, he replied, "There was no need. They weren't sick. Why waste money?"
When asked about the diaries describing punishments, he replied, "Those are their fantasies. They exaggerate. Young people love to dramatize." Detective Solis concluded the interrogation. He understood. There would be no confession. David was completely convinced of his righteousness. Louise Turpin was interrogated by Detective Maria Garcia. A separate room, a separate recording. Louise behaved differently. She cried, wiped her eyes, said she was tired, that she wanted to go home, that she didn't understand why she was being held. Garcia asked, "Do you understand the charges?" Louise shook her head. She said, "It's a misunderstanding. She's a good mother. She took care of them, fed them, dressed them, taught them, did everything possible." The detective showed the same photos: restraints, emaciated people, dirt. Louise looked and began to make excuses. She said the restraints were temporary, only when they misbehaved. Isn't it normal to punish for misconduct? All parents do that. Garcia asked, "Do all parents tie their children to beds for months?" Louise fell silent. Then she said more quietly, "Maybe not months, maybe a few days." She didn't remember exactly.
She had many worries. The detective asked about food. Louise said they ate, maybe not a lot, but it was enough. She didn't have money for large purchases. David got a salary, but there was never enough money. Garcia showed credit card statements. Trips to Disneyland, restaurants, expensive electronics, spending on entertainment. Louise was silent. Then she said, "Well, sometimes they needed to rest. They worked so hard. They deserved a break." The detective asked, "And the others? Did they deserve a break?" Louise didn't answer. She looked at the table. Garcia changed the subject. She asked, "Have you thought about how they are feeling now?" Louise shook her head. She said, "What about them? Are they in the hospital? When will I see them?" The detective said, "They are undergoing treatment, in serious condition." Louise started crying again. She said, "I want to see them. I miss them. They don't understand what's happening. They need their mother." Garcia asked directly, "Do you understand what you did to them?" Louise looked at the detective. Her face was wet with tears. She said softly, "I did everything I could. I'm not perfect, but I tried. I'm a good mother." The interrogation ended. Louise never admitted guilt. She continued to insist she was a victim of circumstances. She did everything possible in difficult conditions. Detectives reviewed the recordings of both interrogations. They drew a conclusion. Neither David nor Louise showed remorse. They did not express concern for the victim's condition. They did not admit that their actions were criminal. Both were confident they acted correctly. They protected, they raised them, they did what parents were supposed to do. These recordings would become part of the case. They would show the jury not only the facts of the crime, but also the complete lack of empathy in the defendants. They would show that David and Louise Turpin, even after their arrest, saw nothing wrong with what they had done for years. Detectives continued to interview the victims. Each conversation added new details.
Each testimony made the picture fuller. One of the older children, Joshua Turpin, 27 years old, told a story that shocked even experienced investigators. He said, in 2013, his parents made a decision. He was allowed to enroll in college, Mount San Jacinto College, a local community college in Marietta, close to home. The detective asked, "Why were you allowed specifically?" Joshua explained, he was the oldest. His parents wanted someone in the family to get a formal education. It would look good. It would show that homeschooling worked, that their system produced results. Plus, his father insisted he needed a diploma, so he could later get a job, bring money into the family. Joshua submitted his application, passed the entrance exams. He was accepted into the computer science program. Classes began in the fall of 2013, but the joy was short-lived. The detective asked, "Did you go to classes alone?" Joshua shook his head. No. His mother drove him every time. She got behind the wheel, drove him to college, parked, and walked with him into the building. Classes were held in auditoriums. Students entered, sat at desks. The instructor began the lecture. And Louise stood in the hallway, outside the door, the entire lesson, an hour and a half. She just stood and waited. Joshua recounted one day the instructor noticed her, asked who the woman in the hallway was. Joshua said, "My mom. She brought me." The instructor said, "We have buses."
Parking. She doesn't need to wait. Joshua didn't know what to say. He remained silent. After class, his mom asked, "What were you talking about?" Joshua told the truth. Louise got angry. She said, "I'm here to protect you. Don't you dare discuss me with strangers." There were breaks between classes. Students went to the cafeteria, socialized, bought coffee, exchanged phone numbers. Joshua also went to the cafeteria, but his mom followed him, sat at a nearby table, watched, listened. If someone approached to talk, Louise would stand up, come closer, stand next to him, listened to every word. Joshua recounted, one day a girl from the group offered to study together, prepare for an exam. She asked for his phone number. Joshua said, "I don't have a phone." The girl was surprised. She suggested meeting at the library tomorrow. His mom heard. That evening at home, she said, no meetings, only classes. She said that this girl could be dangerous, could drag him into bad company. Joshua didn't go to the meeting. The girl didn't approach him again. The detective asked, "Did you try to ask for help? From teachers? From other students?" Joshua was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I was afraid that Mom would find out, afraid for the others at home. I understood. If I said something wrong, they would suffer. Plus, Mom constantly reminded him, if you tell anyone about the family, they'll take us all away, separate us. I'll never see my brothers and sisters again. It will be my fault." Joshua studied for 1 semester, 4 months. He got good grades, passed all his exams. Then his parents said, "That's enough. There's no more money for tuition. You need to come home, help the family." Joshua returned. He never left the house without his parents again. The detective asked, "What changed after college? Were you punished?" Joshua nodded. Yes. One day he asked, could he go back and finish his studies, complete the program, get a diploma? His father got angry. He said, "You're ungrateful. We gave you a chance. You want more?" He tied him to the bed for 2 weeks. He said, "Now think about your selfishness." After that, Joshua never asked about college again. Investigators verified his words. They requested documents from Mount San Jacinto College. It was confirmed. Joshua Turpin was enrolled as a student from September to December 2013. Attendance was 100%. Grades were good. Then he simply stopped coming. He didn't officially withdraw. He just disappeared.
The college administration tried to make contact. They called the home number. Louise answered. She said he wouldn't be studying anymore. Financial reasons. Thank you for your concern. No one delved deeper. Students drop out all the time. It's normal. Detectives realized, even when one of the victims was given access to the outside world, the control remained absolute. His mom was physically present every minute, monitored every conversation, suppressed any attempt at socialization, and in the end, she took him back into isolation as soon as she decided the experiment was over. Joshua's story proved this was not just a reclusive family. It was a system of total control that operated even outside the home. And now the prosecution would have to convey this to the court. The Riverside County District Attorney's Office began preparing the case for trial. The work lasted several months. They formulated the indictment, systematized the evidence, prepared a list of witnesses. Chief Prosecutor Kevin Burrell personally led the case.
He understood this would be one of the most high-profile trials in the county's history. Impeccable preparation was needed. The final indictment contained 49 counts for each defendant. David Turpin was charged with 12 counts of torture, 1 for each of the adult victims, 7 counts of cruelty to dependent persons, 6 counts of endangering life, 12 counts of false imprisonment. Louise Turpin faced the same charges, plus an additional count of neglect of duty. Each charge was supported by evidence, medical reports, photographs of restraints, diary entries, testimonies of 12 victims, neighbor testimonies, financial documents. If the case went to trial, Burrell planned to call more than 50 witnesses, doctors, psychologists, detectives, experts, and, of course, the victims themselves. Defense attorneys David Moxley for David Turpin and Jeff Moore for Louise gained access to the case materials. They began to study them. The volume was shocking. Thousands of pages of documents, hundreds of photographs, dozens of hours of interrogation video recordings, medical reports for each family member, diaries describing punishments.
The lawyers understood. There was no chance of an acquittal. The evidence was too strong. The testimonies were consistent. The medical facts were undeniable. Moxley met with David in prison, showed him some of the materials, explained the situation. He said directly, "If the case goes to trial, you will be found guilty on all counts. The jury will see the photographs, hear the testimonies, see the medical reports. The verdict is predetermined." David remained silent, looked at the documents. Moxley continued, "The maximum sentence for these charges is 344 years, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. You will never get out." He offered an alternative, a plea bargain, a confession of guilt in exchange for a guaranteed sentence. Avoid a public trial, avoid victim testimonies, close the case quickly. David thought for several days, consulted with his lawyer, explored the options. In parallel, Jeff Moore conducted similar negotiations with Louise, showed her the evidence, explained the prospects, offered a deal. Louise resisted longer, cried, said, "I didn't mean to, I just didn't know any other way." Moore explained, "It doesn't matter. The facts are there. The consequences are there. The guilt is obvious." The prosecution was willing to make a deal, but the terms were strict. A full confession of guilt on all counts, waiver of appeals, a minimum sentence of 25 years for each, a maximum of life imprisonment. The specific sentence would be determined by the judge at the hearing. In February 2019, 1 year after his arrest, David Turpin agreed. He signed the documents, pleaded guilty to 14 counts, including torture, abuse, false imprisonment.
A week later, Louise did the same. Signed the confession, 14 counts, full guilt. February 22, 2019, Riverside County Courthouse, plea hearing. David and Louise stood before the judge. Judge Bernard Schwartz read out the charges. He asked each of them, "Do you plead guilty?" David replied softly, "Yes." Louise replied through tears, "Yes." The judge recorded the plea, set the sentencing date for April, gave the victims time to prepare victim impact statements. The lawyers left the courtroom, gave brief comments to the press. Moxley said, "My client understands the seriousness of his actions." Moore added, "My client regrets what happened."
But the guilty plea was only a formality. The real sentence would be pronounced 2 months later, at a hearing where the victims would publicly speak for the first time about what they had endured for 20 years. After the guilty plea, detectives reconstructed the full picture of that night, the night when a 20-year system collapsed. Jordan gave detailed testimony. She recounted how she had prepared for the escape for 2 years, how she had planned every step. It all began in 2016. Jordan found an old phone, a cheap smartphone her parents had forgotten to confiscate. Without a SIM card, technically useless, but Jordan knew one thing: emergency calls work even without a SIM card. You could call 911. She hid the phone under the mattress, charged it secretly when her parents were asleep for a few minutes at a time so they wouldn't notice. Then she began to prepare mentally, rehearsed in her head what she would say to the dispatcher, how she would explain the situation, what words she would use, wrote it down in her diary, memorized it. The main problem, the address. Jordan didn't know her address. She never left the house without her parents.
She hadn't seen the street name. She didn't know the house number. She asked her older sister, Jennifer, for help. Jennifer had seen the mail once. She remembered the address, 160 Muir Woods Road. She told Jordan. Jordan wrote it down in her diary, memorized it. 2 years of planning, 2 years of waiting for the right moment. January 14, 2018, Sunday, around 5 in the morning. Her parents were asleep. Everyone else was also asleep. The house was silent. Jordan lay on her bed. Her heart pounded. The decision was made. Today. She got up, slowly, quietly, approached her room's window. The window hadn't been opened for years, rusty hinges, but Jordan had prepared in advance. She oiled the hinges with kitchen oil, a drop each night for a month. She pushed the frame. The window yielded. It creaked softly, but opened. Jordan turned around, looked at her younger sister in the next bed, decided to wake her, whispered, "Come with me. We'll escape. Call the police." Her sister opened her eyes, nodded, got up, approached the window. Jordan climbed out first. The height was about 2 meters. She jumped onto the grass, turned around, reached out her hand to her sister.
Her sister froze on the windowsill, looked down, looked at Jordan, then back into the room. Fear took over. She shook her head, whispered, "I can't. I'm scared." Jordan tried to persuade her, whispered, "Please, we need help." Her sister shook her head again, stepped back from the window, lay back down on the bed. Jordan was left alone in the yard. For a few seconds she thought, go back? Forget the plan? But then she remembered her brothers and sisters whose movements were restricted, remembered the hunger, remembered how one of them stopped speaking from weakness. She understood, if not now, then never. She walked to the fence, climbed over it, found herself on the street for the first time in many years. The temperature was about 10 degrees Celsius. Jordan was lightly dressed, an old t-shirt, sweatpants. It was cold, but she moved forward. She took out the phone, turned it on. The screen lit up. The battery was almost full. She had charged it all night. Opened the keypad, dialed 911. The call connected. A dispatcher was on the line. Jordan began to speak. Her voice trembled, from the cold, from fear, from adrenaline.
She said what she had rehearsed for 2 years, clearly, in order. Name, information, address, situation, restraints, brothers and sisters, help needed. The dispatcher listened, recorded it, transferred to a patrol unit. Jordan stayed on the line, walked to the intersection, waited for the police. 4 minutes passed. She saw a patrol car. The car pulled up, stopped. Officers got out. Jordan showed the phone with photos, explained again, pointed to the house. The officers listened, understood this was serious. One call, one night, one decision by an almost adult girl who looked very young, and the system that David and Louise Turpin had built for 20 years collapsed in 4 minutes. Jordan didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know her parents would go to prison. She didn't know her story would become known worldwide. She just knew one thing. It couldn't go on like this anymore, and she was the only one who could stop it. April 19th, 2019. Riverside County Courthouse was packed. Journalists, prosecutors, lawyers, and several members of the Turpin family, those who dared to come. Judge Bernard Schwartz entered the courtroom. Everyone stood.
The sentencing hearing began. David and Louise were brought in separately, both in prison uniforms, both in handcuffs. They were seated at the defense tables. Their faces were pale. Louise was crying even before the procedure began. The judge explained the order. First, victim impact statements would be heard. Then the defendants would speak. Then the sentence. The prosecutor called the first witness, Joshua Turpin, 28 years old, the one who had gone to college. He walked to the podium, held a sheet of notes. His hands trembled. He began to read. His voice was quiet, but firm. My parents stole my life. They stole my education, my opportunities, my relationships with people. The years I should have spent learning, working, living, I spent in captivity. He paused, looked at his parents. But I want you to know, I will survive. We will all survive. We are stronger than you thought. He sat down. The judge thanked him. Next was Jennifer, an adult, 30 years old, the eldest. She approached slowly, without notes, spoke from memory. I don't remember what it's like to be free. I don't remember a normal life. For 20 years, I was a prisoner.
In a house that should have been a home. Her voice broke. She stopped, continued. I don't know if I can ever forgive, but I know I no longer want to live in fear. And today is the first day I can say that out loud. Third was Jordan, 18, the one who called 911. She stood confidently before the judge, spoke clearly. I did what I had to do. I saved my brothers and sisters, and myself. I don't regret anything. Our parents told us the outside world was dangerous, but the most dangerous place was inside our home. She paused, looked at David and Louise. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I need to move on, to live on, and I don't want hatred for you to poison my life the way you poisoned my childhood. The courtroom was silent. Some journalists wiped away tears. Jordan sat down. Several more people gave testimonies. Each was similar: pain, lost years, hope for the future, and for some, forgiveness. Not for their parents, for themselves. The judge gave the floor to the defendants. He asked, "Do you wish to say anything before sentencing?" David stood up. His voice trembled. He said he was sorry, that he loved them.
That he didn't want to cause harm. That he tried to protect them. That everything got out of control. Louise stood up after him. She sobbed uncontrollably, said through tears, "I love you. I wanted what was best. I'm a bad mother. I apologize. I apologize." The judge listened silently, then raised his hand, said, "Enough," asked them to sit down. Silence fell. The judge opened a folder of documents, began to read the sentence. He said, "The court has reviewed all case materials, studied the testimonies, examined the expert conclusions, heard the victims and the defendants." He continued, "The acts committed by David and Louise Turpin are among the most grievous crimes against a family in the history of this state. The systematic nature, the duration, the complete absence of concern for the well-being of dependent persons." He paused. "David Allen Turpin, on 14 counts, I sentence you to life imprisonment. The right to parole arises no earlier than 25 years. David didn't react, sat motionless. "Louise Anna Turpin, on 14 counts, I sentence you to life imprisonment. The right to parole arises no earlier than 25 years.
Louise covered her face with her hands, cried. The judge closed the folder, said session adjourned, struck the gavel. David and Louise were led away. They no longer looked back, didn't look at their dependents in the courtroom, simply followed the escort, disappeared behind the door. The courtroom slowly emptied. The victims embraced, cried. But these were tears of relief. It was finally over. They could finally begin to truly live. After the sentencing, a new chapter began. 13 people were free, but freedom proved more challenging than anyone expected. Immediately after their release, the family was separated. 7 adults were granted adult status. They were placed separately in special homes under the supervision of social services. 6 younger children went to foster families, 2 or 3 in each. The older children began to learn to live independently for the first time in decades. Simple things proved incredibly difficult. How to use an ATM, how to pay bills, how to cook food, how to talk to strangers. All these skills that people usually acquire gradually throughout life, they had to master in months. Jordan gave an interview several years after her release. She spoke about the difficulties. She said the hardest thing was learning to trust people. For years, she had been told everyone around was an enemy. It was hard to unlearn that. Another challenge, technology. The older children missed 2 revolutions, the internet and smartphones. For them, all of this was new, unfamiliar, frightening. Joshua recalled the first time he was given a smartphone, he didn't know what to do with it. He tapped the screen at random, was afraid to break something. A social worker showed him basic things, how to make a call,
how to write a message, how to find information. What was obvious to an ordinary person, for him was a revelation. But there was also progress. Some of the older children found jobs, simple ones, waiters, cashiers. They started earning money, learned to drive, got their licenses. Slowly, step by step, they built new lives. And then something happened that no one expected. 2021, 3 years after their release. An investigation revealed some of the younger children placed in a foster family were subjected to severe abuse again by another family, other people.
But again, punishments. Again, food restriction. Again, isolation. Riverside County launched an internal investigation. It was discovered social services had not conducted a proper vetting of the foster family. They missed red flags, did not conduct regular inspections. The victims were removed from that family, transferred to another location. The county supervisor issued a public apology. He said, "We failed them twice. First, we couldn't protect them from their parents. Then, we couldn't protect them from the foster care system." Another problem, finances. After the parents' arrest, a relief fund was announced. More than $600,000 were collected from private donors. The money was supposed to go towards education, medical care, and psychological assistance. But in 2022, some of the victims filed a lawsuit. They claimed that money from the fund was not reaching them, that the management system was opaque, that they were not receiving the promised help. The court began an investigation. It was revealed most of the money went to administrative expenses, to management salaries, to legal services. Less than half of the collected funds reached the intended recipients. The scandal became public. The fund was disbanded. The remaining money was divided directly among the victims. But despite all the difficulties, there were also bright moments. Jordan enrolled in college, studied social work. She wanted to help other people who found themselves in similar situations, gave motivational speeches, told her story, became a symbol of survival. Joshua completed the program he started in 2013, received his diploma, found a job at an IT company, rented an apartment, lived independently, for the first time in his life. Jennifer learned to read and write again, underwent an intensive adult education program, slowly caught up on what she had missed, dreamed of one day writing a book about her experience. The younger children also adapted, attended regular schools, interacted with peers, learned to live normal lives. They had more time ahead of them, more opportunities. All 13 regularly attended therapy. Psychologists said the consequences of such prolonged trauma are irreversible. PTSD, anxiety disorders, trust issues. These would stay with them forever.
But they learned to live with it, learned to cope, learned to be free. David and Louise Turpin remained in prison. Their eligibility for parole would arise in 2044. They would be very old by then. The chances of release were minimal. Most likely, they would spend the rest of their lives behind bars. And their victims, no longer victims but survivors, continued to build the lives that were stolen from them. Slowly, with difficulty, but forward.